I guess my story is pretty typical of many a failed young actress. I came out to LA on a Greyhound bus when I was 18 with stars in my eyes and a dream in my heart, convinced I was going to be the next Demi Moore or Sharon Stone. Yeah, it was the early 90s. Needless to say, things didn't work out that way. I won't get into my life back home in Mississippi in too much detail. It sucked. My parents were strict, humorless, anti-intellectual, working-class Southern Baptist fundamentalists of the fire and brimstone variety. Is there any other kind? They didn't want me to go out to the West. They wanted me and my sister, the lucky one who escaped to college and actually made something of herself, to become nuns and join a convent. Screw that. I took off the day I turned 18 and never looked back. I got a job as a waitress at one of those retro 50s diners that were so popular on the West Coast back in the late 80s and early 90s. Enrolled in some acting classes and rented a crappy apartment not much bigger than a walk-in closet, all I could afford, in a pretty seedy part of town where all the liquor stores had steel bars on the windows and all the buildings had gang graffiti on them. The apartment building where I lived wasn't much better, the kind of dump that always had used syringes littering the hallways from the junkies, and you always watched your back, coming and going in case someone followed you and tried to jump you. One of my neighbors got busted in a police raid. Turns out he'd been running a crack den in his apartment. It was a pretty scary place. I guess it's kind of miraculous I never got mugged, or killed. I was a pretty naive kid. I was convinced I would just stroll into the big studios, show them what I was made of. They'd offer me a juicy contract, and before I knew it, I'd be up on the big screen playing Tom Cruise's leading lady. Yeah, looking back, I was pretty stupid. But what else can you expect from a dumb southern girl with a 10th grade education living in the big city for the first time in her life? I found out the hard way that unless you have representation, the studios won't give you the time of day, much less schedule you an appointment. Same with all the auditions and casting calls I went to. I decided if I was ever going to stand a chance of getting any further than the reception area before security sent me away, I needed to find an agent. Easier said than done. Most of them turned me down flat because I didn't have a SAG card. I didn't even know what a SAG card was. I finally met Bill, a down-on-his-luck third-rate Hollywood agent who looked more like a sleazy used car salesman. Baggy, cheap suit, a tie that would have been considered loud in the 70s, and the world's most obvious toupee. I met him at his agency, which was housed in a cheap office building downtown. Bill's office was dimly lit, sparsely furnished, and smelled of cigar smoke. I sat in front of his messy desk on a folding metal chair under the fly-specked light fixtures and pretty much begged him to give me a chance. He agreed to represent me. Maybe it was because he only had 2 other clients and needed to pay his rent. Or maybe he really saw some promise in me. Or, more likely, it was the short skirt and low-cut blouse I was wearing. I'll confess, I was pretty good-looking when I was younger and quite stacked. And I'm ashamed to admit, I did use that to my advantage. I filled out some paperwork and Bill told me he'd be in touch if he landed any work for me. About a month later, I got a call from Bill telling me a TV producer wanted to see me about a new show he was casting. I was thrilled. I met the producer, Cliff, a tall, thin guy in his 30s with a ponytail, wearing a Eurotrash designer suit, at his office, and he explained the premise of the show and the character he was looking to cast. Then he got down to business and told me that he had 6 other actresses in line for the role, and he needed me to show him what made me stand out from the rest of the herd, to display what an exceptional talent I could be. I thought he wanted me to do a live reading, until he sat back in his chair, came undone, and gave me a pointed look. It was at that point that I learned about the sordid, sleazy underside of Hollywood. The casting couch. This was 1993, remember 25 years before #MeToo. I'm not proud of what happened next, but I was young and poor and stupid and desperate. The first thing I did when I got home was run to the medicine cabinet. A week later, Cliff called me to tell me that I had won the role. I was ecstatic, convinced I had finally made it to the top, and that soon I was going to be a huge star. Again, things didn't work out that way. The show I was cast in was called Till Death Do Us Part. You might be vaguely familiar with it and distantly remember hearing about it on nostalgia forums and compilations of the worst sitcoms of all time. Hey, you might even have been one of the 200 people who actually watched it during its original run. Yeah, that's a joke. Basically, it was a third-rate Married with Children knockoff that aired on a second-rate startup network for 3 years between 1994 and 97. The show followed the lives of a dysfunctional lower-middle-class family, the Glovers, an unhappily married couple constantly at each other's throats, and their 3 screwed-up kids. I played Emily Glover, the slutty redhead sexbot teenage daughter. I was the main draw of the show, the fan service, and the producers always made sure to dress me up in skimpy, revealing outfits to appeal to the horny adolescent boy / sexually frustrated middle-aged man demographic. I don't think anyone even noticed my acting skills. They were too busy objectifying me. Most of the fan mail I received was just obscene letters from dirty old men and lonely teenage losers gushing all over my body. I just threw it all away. Not really much to be proud of, huh? My 15 minutes of fame basically amounted to being a low-rent Kelly Bundy on a terrible cut-rate sitcom hardly anyone ever watched. The sets were cheap, the budget was low, the humor was lowbrow, and the pay wasn't great, but at least I was able to move into a better apartment. The critics savaged the show mercilessly. Frankly, it's amazing the series lasted as long as it did, considering how dismal the ratings were. And when the show finally wrapped up in the spring of '97 after the 3rd season, it ended on a cliffhanger. My character Emily is torn between 2 guys, the hotshot rich kid star jock of the school who just wants her as his trophy girlfriend, and the geeky reject who genuinely cares about her. The last episode ends with her conflicted, her decision finally made but not revealed to the audience. Naturally, since the series ended right there was never any resolution. Till Death Do Us Part faded into obscurity pretty quickly after it was canceled, having gone mostly unnoticed during its run to begin with. It was never even picked up to air as reruns in syndication. It never even got a home video release. Although you can still watch bootleg episodes of it on YouTube uploaded by people who recorded it during its original run. After the show ended, I tried to move on to bigger and better things, without much success. I had been typecast as a brainless bimbo, and no one would take me seriously. Bill was only able to score a few more roles for me, small parts in low-budget horror movies, and a starring role in the pilot for another sitcom that never took off. A second-rate men's magazine did offer me $10,000 to pose nude for a pictorial, but I turned it down. Bill's calls became more infrequent and eventually stopped altogether. And with that, my brief fling with stardom was at its end. I was officially washed up. Not that I was ever really famous enough to qualify as washed up to start with. By then it was 1999. I was 25 and had done some much-needed maturing. I had taken classes during the run of Till Death Do Us Part and finally gotten my high school diploma. I decided to put acting behind me and go on with my life and pursue more realistic goals. I moved back home to Mississippi and got a job working as a receptionist for a trucking company. I met a truck driver named Reggie, who eventually became my husband. And then after I discovered the hard way that he was an alcoholic with serious anger issues and impulse control problems, he became my ex-husband. We had a son somewhere in between, Anthony, born in 2003. I got full custody, plus child support. That, plus the meager royalties I was earning from my time on the show and my receptionist income, allowed me and Anthony to move into a pleasant 2-story home in the suburbs. The years passed. I raised Tony on my own, with a little help from my sister Rebecca. I think I did a pretty good job overall, and he turned out to be a pretty good kid. I dated a few times, but none of them really made the cut to being boyfriend/future husband material, and I was content to be a single mother. I had pretty much forgotten about my time in Hollywood and put my past as an actress in the rearview mirror. Most of the people I knew never watched the show and didn't even know I was in it. It had been over 20 years, and I figured no one even remembered till Death Do Us Part existed. Until 6 months ago. Someone had remembered the show. And me. Someone had always remembered the show and had never stopped thinking about me. 6 months ago, I met my biggest fan. And it nearly cost me my life. It was a typical chilly, or as chilly as winter gets in Mississippi anyway, mid-40s, February afternoon, and I had just gotten home from work. The trucking company had been reducing my hours lately. This was the start of the COVID outbreak in the US, and I had gotten off early that day. I parked in the driveway, got out of my car, and headed for the front door. It was just past 1 o'clock, and Anthony was still in school for another couple of hours, and I was looking forward to some much-needed me time alone in the house before he got back. Don't get me wrong, I love my son to death, but he was almost 17 now, and being a single working parent to a teenager who's just gotten his driver's license and is now discovering girls and God knows what else, along with his own independence and streak of parental rebellion, is no easy job. I needed a break. I fumbled my keys out of my purse and unlocked the door, planning on enjoying a nice, leisurely bath, a glass of wine, and some TV before Tony gets home around 3. I opened the door and entered my house, flipping on the light. I noticed something wrong right away. My dog Russ, a big 6-year-old Doberman, didn't come running to the door to greet me after work like he did most days. "Russ?" I called out, setting down my purse and removing my jacket. "Where are you, boy?" I wait for the sound of his claws clicking rapidly across the floor as he scrambled to answer his master's voice, but heard nothing. I listened, feeling a little uneasy. I heard nothing. Nothing at all. The house was dead silent. "Russ?" I moved through the living room, glancing into the kitchen as I passed it. No sign of him. I wondered if maybe he was asleep upstairs. "Russ, come here, boy!" I called up the stairs as I arrived at them. Nothing. I began to climb the stairs, slowly, feeling deeply unsettled, maybe even a little scared. Something was off. It wasn't just Russ's failure to respond. Things in the house didn't feel right. I can't really explain it any better than that. It was as if everything in the house had been moved around and then placed almost, but not quite, back in their original location. A sense that things were somehow imperceptibly wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly how. I reached the top of the stairs and looked down the hallway. There were 5 doors, 2 on either side and 1 at the end. 3 of the doors went to bedrooms, mine, Tony's, and a spare bedroom we used mostly for storage. The 4th was a hall closet, and the one at the end of the hallway was the bathroom. The first 4 doors were all closed. The bathroom door was half open, and the light was on. I could see it spilling out onto the carpeted hall floor. The light I distinctly remembered turning off after my shower early that morning. I should have turned around and run back downstairs and outside right then and there. Called the police. I should have. I didn't. I think I was trying to rationalize things to myself. To convince myself that I was overreacting and everything was fine. Maybe Anthony himself had gotten out of school early and gotten home before I did. "Tony?" I called out. "Are you in there?" No answer. I walked on the hallway, seemingly in slow motion. At least that's how it seems now. The only sound's the steady beating of my heart and my breathing. I pushed open the bathroom door and looked inside. The smell struck me first, before I even saw anything. I had actually caught a trace of it in the hallway, but hadn't been able to identify it. But when I opened the door, it became overwhelming, hitting me in the face. The sweet scent of fresh-cut flowers. I looked around, taking it in, my eyes wide in disbelief. It took a moment for what my eyes were seeing to actually register in my brain. Roses. Dozens and dozens of roses. Bouquets had been placed everywhere, in the tub, in the sink, on the floor. And then my eyes landed on the medicine cabinet mirror. A message had been written on the glass, printed using a tube of my own lipstick. The red block letters read, "Happy Valentine's Day, Emily." I stood there transfixed in shock. Dimly, I realized what day it was. Friday, February 14th. Emily. The name of the character I had played for 3 years in. Abruptly, I snapped out of it, feeling a sudden urge of terrified adrenaline. Panicked, I turned to bolt down the hallway, downstairs and outside to safety. It was just in time to see my bedroom door fly open and a tall figure clad entirely in black, a black stocking over its head obscuring its features, step out into the hallway between me and the stairs. I halted in my tracks, my blood seeming to freeze in my veins. The black-clad figure was approaching me slowly, almost casually, closing the distance between us. It spoke. A man's voice. "I've been waiting a long time, my love." The man was only 6 feet away from me, and then 4. I suddenly bolted forward, dodging around him and making a beeline, not for the stairs, but for my bedroom door, which was closer. I slammed the door and locked it, my heart racing. I fumbled for my phone, but then realized with a sinking feeling of horror it was in my purse, the purse I had left downstairs. There was a sudden loud thud at the door, causing me to jump. Another thud. The door quavered in its frame, and the man was slamming against it. Thud! I darted over to the landline phone on the nightstand next to my bed and grabbed the handset in a shaking hand. I dialed 911 frantically and raised it to my ear, hearing only dead silence. The line was out. Thud! Then a cracking sound. The door was starting to splinter. I didn't know how much longer it would hold. I turned to the closet, suddenly remembering the Magnum I kept in there for home defense. I threw it open and flailed around inside in a wild panic. I found the metal box and opened it. To find it empty. My gun was gone. Smash! The bedroom door burst open. I spun around just in time to see the intruder charging at me. He caught me around the waist in a bear hug, and I screamed and fought back wildly, clawing at him with my nails. And then one of his arms released me, and he swung his fist into the side of my head. There was a burst of enormous pain, and stars filled my vision. And then it all went black.